Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Reverend Kate Wilkinson, and I am so glad that you are with us this morning for our special Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. weekend celebration service. And this service really wouldn't be happening without Reverend Christy Hardwick and the worship committee this morning. Earlier this week, I looked around at the chaos which is downstairs post-flood, and I realized I could either do that or this, and word went out and they responded beautifully, so I thank you so much. Many of the people around you found a spiritual home here after searching for a place that's caring and welcoming of our individual gifts. What we share here is not an unchanging dogma, but an affirmation that we are called to be agents of love and justice, and to build a world where everyone is cherished for who they are. Doing that requires us, who have privilege, to use our voices, our courage, and our resources to dismantle oppression in all its forms. We begin this morning's service, as we begin all our worship services, by lighting our chalice, symbol of our faith, and I invite Pastor Brenda Haywood to light our chalice this morning.
The Promise and the Practice by Rebecca Savage of Black UU. We light our flaming chalice as a beloved people, united in love and thirsting for restorative justice. May it melt away the tethers that unfold whiteness in our midst. May it spark in us a spirit of humility. May it unite in us radical love that transforms our energy into purposeful action. This is a chalice of audacious hope. This chalice shines a light on our shared past, signaling our intention to listen deeply, reflect wisely, and move boldly toward our highest ideals.
Thank you.
We light our next candle.
That's going to come a little bit later. Okay, yeah.
Excuse me, this is my debut.
Doing beautiful.
We threw her in the deep end on a day we have no order of service, and we're doing things in a different order. So it is our privilege to present this service today, which was written by Reverend Clyde Grubbs and Mary Jane Holden, and edited and rearranged for our purposes by Reverend Christy. You are about to hear the story of the civil rights movement, a story that needs to be told over and over so that we remember its people and its principles. But it's not a comfortable story, nor should it be. In fact, I wish you discomfort as the story unfolds. I wish you anger and unrest. I wish you holy agitation. I wish for all of us to leave this sanctuary at the end of the hour with fresh honor and appreciation for the mighty struggle that took place in our country in the 1960s, and for the ways that the struggle continues today. In order to understand the power and meaning of the life of Martin Luther King Jr., we have to go back in history and explain who Jim Crow was.
Jim Crow
was a character in the minstrel shows that white Americans flocked to in the middle of the 19th century. The shows were full of music and dancing, clowns and skits. Jim Crow was a black-faced actor, and the comedy was to depict African Americans as stupid and people to be made fun of.
For many white Americans, Jim Crow defined what real African Americans were supposed to be like. So, in the wake of the Civil War and Reconstruction, when the white power structure of the southern states tried to find a way to continue the oppression of now free African Americans and instituted a group of laws putting African Americans in second-class status, they named those laws after the clown character Jim Crow.
Jim Crow laws kept black people in separate schools and in menial jobs. They effectively denied the African American people the right to vote by requiring that they take a test on the U.S. Constitution, which was waived for white people. The examiners always found that the African Americans had failed the test. There was also a tax on voting in some jurisdictions, which kept poor voters, which African Americans most often were, off of the voter lists.
One of the most humiliating Jim Crow laws was the racial segregation of public transportation. White folks rode in the front of the bus, and black folks rode in the back. There were little signs along the bus aisle that indicated white or black. These signs could be flipped, and African Americans told to stand if the white section filled up.
The African American people struggled against Jim Crow laws since their inception. But in 1954, the Supreme Court made a landmark decision in Brown versus the Board of Education. The court made it clear that laws setting up separate schools were unconstitutional. Separate schools were inherently unequal, and they therefore violated the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. It was clear that Brown versus Board of Education meant an end to all forms of racial segregation in public facilities, but local Jim Crow laws would need to be overcome one by one.
Won't you please join us now in singing hymn number 169, We Shall Overcome. 169, We Shall Overcome. Please rise as you are able. please remain standing for our affirmation. Because we don't have an order of service today, we're going to do this call and response. I will say one line and you will repeat it after me. Love is the spirit of this meeting house.
Love is the spirit of this meeting house.
This is our great covenant.
This is our great covenant.
To dwell together in peace.
To dwell together in peace.
To seek the truth in love.
To seek the truth in love.
And to help one another.
And to help one another.
You may be seated. The sharing of joys and sorrows is a time when this beloved community creates room for those among us who need to grieve or to celebrate a happiness. Our caring takes the shape of collective listening to those joys and sorrows. We honor those who need healing by listening to these headlines now. And our caring extends to seeking out these individuals later in the morning or during the week to listen to the fuller stories. If you are moved to do so after we light our first candle, which is a candle of gratitude, I invite you to come forward, light a candle, and share briefly with this community what is on your heart this morning. You can also light a candle in silence at any time during the service at the table to the right of the pulpit, where there is a journal to record your thoughts and prayers.
Morning. Now I'm really supposed to be down here. Oops. We light this first candle for gratitude to someone in this congregation, who have been many this week, who have done something for the life of our congregation. And Kate has given me this full list of those who helped clean up this week. It includes Jean, Kate, Moses, Deb, Alex, Reese, Tracy, Myra, and Lorraine, especially Lorraine, who brought home all of Reverend Kate's papers, soggy papers at that, and dried them with her hairdryer, and then ironed them.
Boy, I don't want to do this, but I'm standing up here with a major concern. Our board president, Bruce de St. Croix, had ankle fusion last summer. And since December, he's been saying, I'm in excruciating pain. And I spent the day in the ER with him yesterday, and indeed, the two leg bones above the fusion are broken. And he's facing more surgery, probably, most likely. And he once again is going to need our helping hands.
I'm lighting this candle on behalf of my sister-in-law, Juliette Corti Marquand, a native of Ghana, who is a beautiful, successful, loving mother of two, an entrepreneur, working now on her black belt in karate. She comes from a magnificent country. I light this candle on her behalf.
I light this candle for healing my dear friend Betty Burks, who's a beautiful spirit and a lifelong activist. She's facing a health challenge, and I just ask you to hold her in your prayers.
I light this I light this candle of gratitude for Mackenzie, who is sitting back there. Do you want to give a wave, Mackenzie? This is Mackenzie, who's staying with me and Lisa for a while, and she has just brought so much delight to our house during a very stressful few weeks. So I thank her for that.
This is a candle of extreme gratitude for an event that happened at 2 o'clock yesterday at St. Mary's, who offered us their space because we couldn't use ours. So I'm grateful to them for that. This was enabled by the Racial Justice Committee, and I particularly want to thank Allison Dwyer, I don't think she's here today, and Reverend Brenda Haywood. It was a presentation by Jim and Robin Miller, who are both poets and artists, and they are so inspirational. They gave an hour-long presentation on their artwork and on their poetry and on the history of Robin's acceptance of her coming from Africa. It took her a long time to accept that. It was very interesting. And then we had a dialogue with the whole room, we're about 30 people there, which was the most constructive, loving, respectful discussion I have ever heard on this topic. And the last thing she said was, it's simple. All we have to do is love one another.
Hi, I just want to express my gratitude to everybody that helped in this past couple of weeks, a week and a half since the Thursday storm, and especially to Kate and by golly. I sent her an email saying when she took this calling to Provincetown, she didn't know the flood of experiences she was going to be facing. But this has been my home, my spiritual home, for 35 years, and it means everything to me. And although I was not available this past week, I was at a retreat. I'm back, and I hope that any and all of us who have time to help give a call or an email and learn when we should get down here, when our help would be the best. And sometimes it's probably best to be out of the way, but we'll learn when we call and email. So thank you, Kate. Thank you, everybody.
Good morning. I light this candle in honor of Mamie Jones Peters, who taught me so much about love throughout my whole childhood and took me with her to the Memorial Baptist Church on 115th Street and Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard, and supplemented so much love that I was lucky enough to be privileged to receive in my life already. So I stand here, golden love child, because of this wonderful woman. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. I'm David, and it's me again. I just want to be mindful that a federal judge has done something to protect 800,000 people who have been living in terror, and to be mindful of the judges who sometimes have a very lonely job to do. Thank you.
I'm lighting a candle. Oops. You can hear me without that. Hi, I'm lighting this candle of joy. Some of you already know that on Christmas morning, my beloved here asked me to marry him. Thank you. So I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was surprised, completely taken off guard.
Me too.
So anyway, we're engaged now, and thank you very much.
Thank you for saying yes.
And one other joy that's also a big joy is that he's singing in the choir with us. Yay! Thank you.
What a wonderful way to end that. We light this final candle for all the joys and concerns that have been shared today, and for the ones remaining in our hearts. We hope that you will reach out to those who have shared today with love and care.
By 1963, the civil rights movement had grown into a national movement. There had been sit-ins at lunch counters, voter registration drives, freedom rides on interstate buses, and many school districts had accepted school desegregation. But there was fierce resistance in a number of states, including Alabama. Governor George Wallace and the officials in a number of locales vowed to resist, even in the face of court decisions and growing federal pressure. Wallace had just become governor of Alabama. His inaugural speech contained these words: "In the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth, I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny. And I say, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever." Wallace would be proven wrong, but it took several years of determined effort to overcome Alabama white supremacist power structure.
On April 10th, 1963, the city government got a court injunction ordering an end to all protests. But Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian, Southern Christian Leadership Conference disobeyed the court order. King declared, "We cannot, in all good conscience, obey such an injunction, which is an unjust, undemocratic, and unconstitutional misuse of the legal process." King himself knew he would be arrested if he kept on going, and he worried about that. They were running out of money, and Dr. King was good at fundraising. He wondered if he could do more on the outside than on the inside. But finally he decided he had to go to jail in Birmingham. "Friends," he said, "I have to make a faith act. I don't know what will happen or what the outcome will be. I don't know where the money will come from." But on April 12th, he got himself arrested for violating the court order, and he was slammed into solitary confinement.
Finally, after a huge movement all across the country just to raise the money, King was released on April 19th, 1963. During his time in jail, Dr. King came to recognize how big the movement was becoming. It wasn't just about the Deep South anymore, even though that's where the oppression of black people was the worst and had lasted the longest. No, this was about black people all across the country. In his famous letter from Birmingham jail, he wrote, and I'm going to now read a line and then ask you to repeat that line after me. In his letter from Birmingham jail, he wrote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality.
We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality,
tied in a single garment of destiny."
Tied in a single garment of destiny.
Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly.
Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly.
Never again can we afford to live with the narrow. Never again can we afford to live with the narrow, provincial, outside agitator idea.
Provincial, outside agitator idea.
Anyone who lives inside the United States
Anyone who lives inside the United States
can never be considered an outside anywhere, an outsider anywhere within its bounds.
Can never be considered an outsider anywhere within its bounds.
On May 2nd, barely 2 weeks after King's release, more than 1,000 black children came together to protest in Birmingham, Alabama. 900 of them were arrested. The next day, nearly 2,500 more took their place.
Musicians could start to play "We Shall Overcome."
That's in the original.
In pictures that were broadcast and printed all over the country, nonviolence protesters were seen being beaten by angry police officers. Children were driven to the ground. John Lewis said, "We didn't fully comprehend at first what was happening. We were witnessing police violence and brutality, Birmingham style." Unfortunately for Bull Connor, the sheriff, so was the unrest of the rest of the world. So was the unrest of the world. Agreements started to be made. Pledges for the desegregation of public accommodations, for more fair hiring practices, for better communication between black and white leaders.
But the white racists couldn't stand that. The home of Dr. King's brother was bombed. Another bomb was planted near the motel where King was staying. A bomb went off on Sunday at 9:45 a.m. at the 16th Street Baptist Church and killed 4 little girls. It killed 4 little girls at Sunday school. It was a national issue now. It was time for everyone, young and old, rich and poor, to join in solidarity together. On August 28, 1963, more than 200,000 demonstrators showed up in Washington, D.C. and marched to the Lincoln Memorial. That's where Martin Luther King Jr. gave the speech that everyone remembers, the speech about his dream that became everyone's dream.
We take this moment now for a prayer written by an African-American Universalist Unitarian, Viola Abbott. As I complete this prayer, we will have a few moments of silence. Let us open our hearts, still our minds, and enter a time of prayer. Let us call forth and hold in our hearts the stories of all who have come before us, the memories of those who are here with us today, and the hope for tomorrow and for all of those who will come after us. Let us be thankful for this opportunity for healing, forgiveness, and reconciliation, while knowing that we can never, should never, forget what has brought us here today. Let us be glad that voice has not only been given to those whose sorrow and pain were their companions in this faith, but that the stories told by the voices have been received with a goal of redemption and understanding. Let us call upon that light which shines in each of us to give us the strength to walk together into the future and do the work that is necessary and which does not end here. Let us have the wisdom to lovingly have the conversations we need to have with each other, that we must have with each other, in order to grow this faith in radical love and inclusion. Amen.